Why was everyone looking away? The hangar smelled like cold metal and jet fuel. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting sharp shadows across the concrete floor. Engineers moved between toolboxes and diagnostic carts, their voices low, careful. And in the center of it all stood a woman they refused to defend. She didn't notice, or maybe she did and simply didn't care. Major Evelyn Reed held a data pad in both hands, her thumbs moving across the screen with the precision of a surgeon. Telemetry data, system diagnostics, the kind of numbers that separated a successful flight from a fireball at 40,000 feet. Her flight suit was standard issue, olive drab, faded at the seams from too many washes and too many missions. No decorations, no flash, just a name tag that read her rank and nothing more. Her hair was pulled back tight, practical, severe. The lines around her eyes told a story that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with altitude. She had spent years staring into the sun from behind a canopy, searching for threats that most people would never see, never know existed. And right now, she was being ignored. No, worse than that, she was being dismissed. Lieutenant Commander Vance Corbin stood 15 feet away, arms crossed, chin up. His flight suit wasn't just clean, it was tailored, custom fit. The patch on his shoulder was bright, colorful, arrogant, Sky Devils, elite, untouchable. He was flanked by two younger pilots who stood the same way he did, mirrored his posture, shared his smirk. They were waiting for someone important to arrive. Someone who could actually help them. Corbin's voice cut through the hangar like a blade. "I need to speak to the pilot in command, the actual pilot." The words dripped with confidence, the kind of confidence that came from never being truly tested, never being broken, never standing at the edge of oblivion and wondering if your next breath would be your last. Reed didn't look up. Her finger traced a line of data across the screen. Engine temperature, fuel flow, hydraulic pressure, each number mattered. Each decimal point could mean the difference between life and death. She knew this. The engineers knew this. But Corbin, he saw a woman with a clipboard. Nothing more. "Ma'am," he said, the word wrapped in mock politeness. "This is the XR-7 Aurora, a $2 billion hypersonic asset. I appreciate the ground crew's diligence, but my team and I are scheduled for the final integration sim in 10 minutes. He stepped closer, invading her space, towering over her. "So if you could please find whoever is in charge, someone with a G-suit instead of a clipboard, we can get this show on the road." The younger pilots snickered. The engineers looked away. They knew who she was. They all knew. But it wasn't their place to correct a decorated squadron leader, a man tipped for command, a man whose ego was as legendary as his flight hours. So they stayed silent. And Reed, she kept working. 3 blocks away, in a secure office with monitors covering every wall, General Marcus Thorne leaned closer to his screen. He watched the way she held the data pad, not casual, not nervous, proprietary, like a master craftsman examining their life's work. He saw the way her weight balanced on the balls of her feet, a pilot's posture, always ready for a sudden shift in momentum. And he saw something else, something that made him smile. Calm, unshakable, bone-deep calm. The kind that absorbed arrogance and rendered it powerless. Corbin was still talking, still posturing. "Look, I don't know who you are, but I'm the lead pilot for this integration. That means this multi-billion-dollar piece of hardware is my responsibility. My team has been training for this for 18 months. We're the best of the best." He gestured dismissively at the Aurora behind her, a machine that looked less like an aircraft and more like a shard of obsidian night sky. Seamless, black, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. No visible cockpit, no windows, just faint lines that hinted at sensor arrays designed to see what satellites couldn't. "We are not going to have our final certification delayed, because some civilian contractor is triple-checking the fuel gauges." He glanced at her name tag. Reed, is that it? Well, Reed, the adults are here now. Go fetch some coffee and let the real pilots handle the important work. The insult hung in the air like smoke. Even his wingmen shifted uncomfortably. The ground crew chief, a master sergeant with 30 years of service, started forward. His face was thunder, but Reed gave the slightest shake of her head. Just enough to stop him. Then she looked up. Her eyes were pale blue, piercing, and utterly devoid of emotion. Not anger, not indignation, not fear. Just the calm, analytical gaze of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. She pressed a final button on her screen. The data pad chimed softly. "Pre-flight diagnostic complete," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "All systems are green. The simulator is ready for you, Commander." No defense, no explanation, no protest. Just facts. Corbin scoffed. He turned away like he'd won some great victory and strode toward the simulator control room. "About time," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's see if this thing can keep up with a real pilot." And Reed, she followed in silence. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. What would you do if the machine you trusted suddenly turned on you? The simulator control room was a theater of technology, darkened, dominated by a massive wraparound screen that displayed the world from the Aurora's perspective. Corbin settled into the command chair like it was a throne, ergonomic mesh, polished metal, authority made tangible. His wingmen took their stations on either side. A handful of senior engineers and the ground crew chief stood in the back, watching, tense, waiting. Reed entered quietly. She took a position at a small auxiliary console in the corner, unassuming, forgotten. Her data pad docked and glowing with readouts that only she seemed to monitor. Corbin threw a comment over his shoulder, magnanimous, condescending. "Stay and watch, Reed. You might learn something about how we fly on the sharp end." The simulation began. The screen flickered to life, a flawless ascent through a hyper-realistic sky. Corbin was undeniably skilled. His hands moved with fluid precision over the controls. His commands to his wingmen were crisp, authoritative. For 30 minutes, the exercise went perfectly. The Aurora performed a series of complex high-altitude reconnaissance maneuvers, dodging simulated threats, gathering intelligence data with textbook efficiency. Corbin was relaxed, confident. He cracked jokes over the comms, putting on a performance for the audience, demonstrating his effortless mastery. And then, without warning, the world fell apart. A klaxon blared through the control room. Red warning lights flashed across every screen. Multiple system failure, multiple system failure. The synthesized voice was cold, robotic, merciless. On the screen, the Aurora's nose pitched down violently. The aircraft began to spin, altitude dropping, speed increasing. The numbers on the displays turned red, then began flashing. Corbin's hands flew across the controls. Muscle memory, training, years of experience condensed into frantic motion. Nothing worked. Come on," he muttered. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his jaw clenched. The relaxed confidence was gone, replaced by something raw, something close to fear. His wingmen called out suggestions. The engineers leaned forward. Everyone was shouting, everyone except Reed. She sat in the corner watching. Her hands rested on the console, not moving, not typing, just watching. The Aurora continued its deadly spiral, 30,000 feet, 25,000, 20. Corbin's breathing was ragged now, visible on the biometric display beside his chair, heart rate spiking, adrenaline flooding his system. "I can't pull out," he said, his voice cracked. "I can't." 15,000 feet. 10. The ground rushed up on the screen. Mountains, trees, the harsh reality of physics and gravity and failure. 5,000 feet. And then Corbin did what every pilot fears they might do. He froze. His hands hovered over the controls, paralyzed, his mind unable to process the cascade of failures fast enough to find a solution. 3,000 feet. The room held its breath. 2,000. Override, Reed said. One word, quiet, calm. Her fingers moved across her auxiliary console, a single sequence. No hesitation, no wasted motion. On the screen, the Aurora's nose lifted. Impossibly. The spin slowed, stabilized. The aircraft leveled out at 800 feet above the simulated terrain, so close that the trees on the screen were individually visible. And then it climbed. Smooth, controlled, perfect. The silence in the control room was deafening. Corbin sat frozen in his chair, staring at the screen like he'd just witnessed a resurrection. His hands still trembled, his chest still heaved. Reed stood and walked to the center of the room. No fanfare, no announcement. General Thorne's voice came through the overhead speakers, measured, deliberate. Lieutenant Commander Corbin, you have just experienced the Reed Cascade, a catastrophic multi-system failure scenario designed specifically for the XR-7 Aurora. It is considered unrecoverable by conventional means. Corbin turned slowly in his chair, looking at Reed like he was seeing her for the first time. Major Reed designed this aircraft, Thorne continued. She is the chief test pilot. She has more flight hours on experimental platforms than anyone in the United States Air Force, and she just saved your life, even if it was only a simulation. The weight of those words settled over the room like lead. Corbin opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't know. Reed looked at him with those same pale blue eyes, still calm, still analytical. You never asked, she said. And in that moment, something broke inside Vance Corbin, not his spirit, not his pride, something deeper, the illusion that volume equaled authority, that confidence equaled competence. He had learned what humility felt like. Could you recover from a fall like that? The data pad in Reed's hand showed numbers that didn't make sense. Biometric readings from Corbin's chair. Heart rate 190, blood pressure spiking, cortisol flooding his system. The physiological response to dying. Even though he never left the ground. She looked at the screen. The Aurora simulation was still flying, still climbing, already back at cruising altitude like nothing had happened, like the laws of physics hadn't just been bent into submission. The engineers were whispering, checking their own screens, trying to understand what they'd just witnessed. One of the younger pilots, Corbin's wingman, spoke first. How did you? How is that even possible? Reed didn't answer immediately. She walked to the main display and pulled up the flight data. Lines of telemetry scrolled past, red indicators, failure cascades, system after system going dark. The Aurora doesn't fly like conventional aircraft, she said. Her voice carried through the room without her needing to raise it. It's neural networked, adaptive. When one system fails, the others compensate, but they need to be told how. She highlighted a section of code. This is the recovery sequence. 347 individual commands executed in under 2 seconds. It requires simultaneous input from primary and auxiliary control stations. She looked at Corbin. One person can't do it alone. The implication hung there, heavy, undeniable. Corbin had been set up to fail, not maliciously, not cruelly, but deliberately, to teach him something that no amount of classroom instruction could convey. I've crashed this simulation 43 times, Reed continued. 43 different scenarios, different altitudes, different system failures. It took me 6 months to perfect the recovery sequence. She paused. 6 months of falling. The room was silent. Even the hum of the electronics seemed muted. The Aurora is the most advanced aircraft ever built, she said. It's also the most unforgiving. It doesn't care about your confidence. It doesn't care about your rank. It only cares about whether you understand it completely, intimately, without hesitation. She looked around the room, at the engineers, at Corbin's wingmen, at the ground crew chief who had wanted to defend her in the hangar. "Ego is weight," she said, "and weight kills." Thorne's voice came through the speakers again. "Commander Corbin, you and your team are dismissed. Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow. We'll discuss whether you're ready to continue with this program." It wasn't a question. Corbin stood slowly, his legs unsteady, his face pale. He looked at Reed one more time. "I'm sorry," he said. The words were barely a whisper. She nodded once, brief. "You learned," she said. "That's what matters." He left with his wingmen trailing behind, their swagger gone, replaced by something quieter, something that looked like respect. When the door closed, the ground crew chief approached Reed. "Major, you didn't have to let him talk to you like that." "Yes, I did," she said. "Why?" "Because words are just noise. Actions are proof." She glanced at the screen one last time. The Aurora was still flying, still perfect, still waiting for someone skilled enough to master it. "He needed to see what he didn't know," she said. "Now he does." The chief nodded. He'd served under her for 3 years. He'd seen her deflect praise, avoid recognition, turn down medals. She never sought the spotlight. But she always did the work. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "Always. You're the best pilot I've ever seen, and I've been doing this for 30 years. Reed smiled, small, fleeting. "Then I'm doing my job," she said. She picked up her data pad and walked toward the door. Before she left, she turned back. "Run the diagnostic on the number 3 hydraulic pump. There's a flutter in the pressure curve, 0.02% variance." The chief looked at his screen, scrolled through pages of data, found it. A variance so small that the automated systems hadn't even flagged it. "How did you?" But she was already gone. 3 blocks away, General Thorne shut off his monitor. He'd seen what he needed to see. Major Reed didn't need his protection. She didn't need his intervention. She was her own authority. And the lesson had been taught. Now the real question was whether Corbin would learn from it. What happens when a legend refuses to be legendary? The weeks that followed were quiet. Reed returned to her usual routine: pre-flight diagnostics, system analysis, test runs in the Aurora that never made the news, never appeared in press releases, flights that pushed the edge of human endurance and machine capability. She flew at the border of space where the sky turned black and the curve of the Earth became visible, where one wrong move, one miscalculation, would send you tumbling into the void. And she did it alone. Corbin, meanwhile, had changed. The custom flight suit was gone, the flashy patch replaced by standard insignia. He showed up early to briefings, stayed late reviewing flight data, asked questions instead of making pronouncements. His wingmen noticed, the other pilots noticed. Word spread through the base like smoke. Viper had been humbled. But Reed, she never spoke of it, never mentioned the simulation, never claimed credit for the transformation. When asked about Corbin in a classified debriefing, she simply said, "He's a good pilot, he'll be better." No elaboration, no judgment. The Aurora program moved forward. Atmospheric testing began. The aircraft broke every record for speed and altitude. Mach 8, 90,000 feet, numbers that seemed impossible until Reed made them routine. Engineers started calling her Ghost. The call sign stuck, not because she was invisible but because she moved through the world without leaving a trace. No ego, no footprint, just results. One evening, a young lieutenant found her in the hangar. It was late. Most of the crew had gone home. Reed was doing what she always did, checking systems, running numbers, making sure. "Major Reed." She looked up from her data pad. "Lieutenant." I wanted to thank you." Reed's expression didn't change. "For what?" "For what you did with Commander Corbin. The story's all over the base. It's inspiring." "It's not a story," Reed said quietly. "It's a lesson, and it wasn't for the base, it was for him." The lieutenant nodded, hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "How do you stay so calm when everything's falling apart, when everyone's panicking? How do you just not?" Reed set down her data pad. She looked at the aurora behind her. The black skin, the invisible seams, the machine that demanded perfection. "Fear is a luxury," she said. "In a crisis there are only two things, the problem and the solution. Focus on the problem, you'll find the solution. Focus on anything else, you become part of the problem." The lieutenant absorbed this, nodded slowly. "Is that from a manual?" "No," Reed said. "It's from falling 43 times and learning to get back up." She picked up her data pad again. The conversation was over, but the lesson had been delivered. The lieutenant walked away knowing something she hadn't known before. That strength wasn't loud. That confidence didn't need an audience. That the quietest person in the room might be the one holding all the answers. A year passed. The Aurora transitioned from testing to operational status. It flew missions that didn't exist in official records, reconnaissance over hostile territories, high-altitude surveillance, the kind of work that prevented wars instead of fighting them. Reed remained the chief test pilot, still quiet, still focused, still refusing every interview request, every ceremony, every attempt to make her a public figure. But her influence spread anyway. The Reed Cascade became mandatory study at the Air Force Academy. The flight data from that simulation, the impossible recovery, was played in classrooms full of young pilots. Instructors would pause the video at key moments. "Look at her hands. No wasted motion. Look at her biometrics. Heart rate barely elevated. That is what mastery looks like." The framed printout of the Aurora's flight path during the cascade was mounted in the main briefing room at Edwards. A jagged line of red ink that slowly, impossibly, resolved into a straight, clean line. It hung next to photos of Chuck Yeager and Neil Armstrong. There was no photo of Reed, at her request. Just a brass plaque beneath the printout. The Reed Cascade. Attitude is the difference between a spin and a controlled descent. And somewhere in a hangar, working under fluorescent lights, checking systems that most people would never see, Reed continued her work. Never seeking recognition. Never needing it. Simply showing up and being excellent. Because that was the only standard that mattered. Could one person change an entire culture? Lieutenant Commander Vance Corbin stood before a new squadron of F-35 pilots, fresh from training, young, confident, the same unchecked arrogance he once carried like armor. But Corbin was different now. The flashy patches were gone, his voice was calmer, his posture less aggressive. He watched more, spoke less, and when he did speak, people listened. He clicked a button. The main screen behind him changed to show the jagged red printout of the Reed Cascade. Some of the new pilots looked confused. "Before we discuss flight plans," Corbin said, his voice steady, "we're going to discuss humility. We're going to talk about the most dangerous thing you bring into a cockpit." He paused. "It's not a faulty engine. It's not an enemy missile. It's your ego." And then he told them the story. He didn't spare himself, didn't soften the details. He recounted his arrogance in the hangar, his condescending words, his complete and utter failure in the simulator. He told them about the quiet major in the plain flight suit, the woman he had dismissed as a technician, the impossible feat of airmanship she had performed. He described the deafening silence of the control room, the weight of General Thorne's disappointment, the profound, life-altering lesson he had learned that day. "I assumed I knew what excellence looked like," Corbin told the rapt audience. "I thought it was loud and confident. I was wrong." He gestured to the screen. Excellence was quiet. It was focused. It was standing in the corner doing the work while everyone else was posturing. The most skilled person I have ever met never once told me how good she was. He paused. "She just showed me." The room was silent. Pilots who moments ago had been joking and laughing now sat forward in their chairs. "When you're out there," Corbin continued, "check your assumptions at the door. The quietest person on your comms channel might be the one with the answer. The unassuming maintenance chief who gives you a warning about a sensor might be saving your life." He looked around the room, meeting eyes, making sure they understood. "Listen more than you talk. Respect the skill, not the swagger. Competence is the only currency that matters at 30,000 feet." He took a breath. "That is the lesson Major Ghost Reed taught me. It's the most important lesson you will ever learn." The briefing continued, but something had shifted in that room. Seeds had been planted. The loud voices became a little quieter. The observers were noticed. The thinkers were valued. One story, one lesson, rippling outward. Corbin had become the carrier of her legacy, spreading the philosophy of quiet professionalism to the next generation. And Reed, she never knew, never asked, wouldn't have cared. She was too busy working. Somewhere in a classified hangar, running diagnostics on a machine that could fly faster than thought, checking numbers, ensuring safety, doing the job that no one saw but everyone depended on. The ground crew chief found her there one evening, late. Everyone else had gone home. "Major, you don't have to stay this late." "Yes, I do," she said without looking up. "Why?" She finally looked at him, those pale blue eyes, calm, focused. "Because if I miss something, someone dies." Simple, direct, true. The chief nodded. He understood. That was the difference between her and everyone else. She carried the weight, without complaint, without recognition. Just duty. Pure, absolute. "For what it's worth, ma'am, you've changed this place." Reed tilted her head slightly. "I haven't changed anything." "With respect, you have. Pilots are different now. They listen, they think, they respect the work instead of the rank." She turned back to her data pad. "Good," she said. "Maybe fewer of them will die." That was all. No pride, no satisfaction, just the quiet acknowledgement that the work mattered more than the recognition. The chief left her there, working, always working. And as he walked out of the hangar into the cool desert night, he understood something profound. Legacy isn't built on monuments, it's built on moments, small decisions, quiet actions, standards maintained when no one's watching. Reed had created a gravity well of competence, so strong that everyone around her was pulled upward. Not through speeches, not through inspiration. Through example. Silent, unwavering, absolute. Where does a legacy live? Not in the history books, not in the headlines, not in the stories told at promotion ceremonies. It lives in the briefing rooms where young pilots learn to check their egos, in the maintenance bays where technicians speak up instead of staying silent, in the cockpits where confident hands remember to stay humble. Major Evelyn Reed never sought to become a legend. She never asked for her name to be spoken with reverence. She simply showed up every day and performed her duties to a standard she set for herself. A standard that existed on a plane beyond most people's comprehension. Her influence wasn't found in one dramatic moment. It was in the slow, steady cultural shift that followed. Pilots became better listeners. Engineers felt empowered. The entire institution began to value the quiet professional as much as the decorated warrior. The story of Ghost and the machine became foundational. A touchstone used to teach core values: integrity, service before self, excellence in all we do. It was a reminder that true authority isn't claimed with a loud voice or a chest full of medals. It's granted in the silent, astonished respect of those who witness undeniable skill. It's not found on a shoulder board or a name tag. It's in the steady, practiced hands that can guide a falling star back to the safety of Earth. Reed continued flying, testing, pushing boundaries that most people didn't know existed. The Aurora program expanded, new pilots were trained, the technology advanced. And through it all, she remained the same. Quiet, focused, unshakable. She deflected praise, avoided ceremonies. When a young captain asked her how she stayed so calm under pressure, she gave the same answer she always gave. I don't have time to be scared. Fear is a luxury. Simple, direct, true. Years passed. The Reed Cascade was studied by thousands of pilots. The framed printout at Edwards became a pilgrimage site for new aviators. They would stand before it, staring at the impossible recovery path, and wonder what it must have felt like. To fall, to know you're dying, and to find a way back. But Reed never talked about it. When pressed, she would simply say, "It's just physics. Understand the machine and the machine will save you." No drama, no heroism. Just competence. One evening, at a small ceremony she couldn't avoid, Reed was presented with a commendation for her work on the Aurora program. General Thorne himself pinned the medal to her uniform. She accepted it with a quiet "Thank you, sir." Afterward, a reporter who had somehow gained access asked her what it felt like to be a role model for women in aviation. Reed looked at him with those pale blue eyes. "I'm not a role model for women," she said. "I'm a test pilot. Gender doesn't matter at 60,000 feet, only skill." The reporter persisted. "But surely you must feel some pride in breaking barriers." "The only barrier that matters," Reed interrupted gently, "is the one between ignorance and understanding, between carelessness and precision. I didn't break anything. I just did the work." She excused herself, went back to her hangar, back to her data pad, back to the numbers that mattered more than the medals. And in that moment, the reporter understood what everyone who met her eventually learned. Reed's greatest achievement wasn't flying faster or higher than anyone else. It was maintaining absolute integrity in a world that constantly rewarded the opposite. She never performed for an audience, never calculated how her actions would be perceived, never played the game. She simply existed on a higher frequency, operating according to principles that didn't bend for politics or praise. The Aurora continued to fly, breaking records, completing missions, saving lives through intelligence gathered at impossible altitudes. And every successful flight was a testament to the woman who built it, who tested it, who understood it better than anyone alive. But if you asked Reed what her proudest accomplishment was, she wouldn't mention the Aurora, wouldn't mention the Cascade, wouldn't mention the lives saved or the records broken. She would say, "I showed up every day and did my job to the best of my ability. That's all anyone should do. No more, no less." And in that simplicity lived the truth that changed everything. Excellence isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply is. Consistent, unwavering, undeniable. Vance Corbin retired as a full colonel 20 years after that day in the simulator. His farewell speech at the Officers' Club was memorable for one reason. He talked about Reed. He told the story again, for the 100th time, maybe the 1,000th. He never tired of telling it, because every time he did, he saw the same thing happen. Pilots who thought they knew everything suddenly realized they knew nothing. And that realization saved lives. "She taught me that silence is strength," Corbin said to the assembled officers. "That humility is armor. That the person who doesn't need to prove anything is the person who has already proven everything." He raised his glass. "To Ghost, who flies higher than any of us will ever reach." The room raised their glasses in return. "To Ghost." But Reed wasn't there. She had declined the invitation. She was in a hangar somewhere, running diagnostics, checking systems, doing the work that never ended. Someone asked Corbin if he thought she would ever retire. He smiled. No, she'll fly until the day she dies, because for her flying isn't a job, it's a calling, it's who she is. And he was right. Major Evelyn Reed flew for another 15 years, training new pilots, testing new systems, maintaining the standard she had set so long ago. When she finally retired, there was no ceremony, no farewell tour, no speeches. She simply turned in her flight suit and data pad, shook the base commander's hand, and left. The next day, a young lieutenant was promoted to chief test pilot, nervous, uncertain, wondering if she could fill the impossible shoes left behind. She found a note in her locker. Handwritten, simple. Trust the machine, trust yourself. Fear is a luxury. The problem and the solution are the only things that matter. You'll do fine. It was signed with just one word. Ghost. The lieutenant folded the note carefully, put it in her pocket, and walked out to the hangar where the Aurora waited. Black, sleek, demanding. She placed her hand on the fuselage, felt the cool composite skin, took a breath, and climbed inside. Ready to fall. Ready to learn. Ready to become what Reed had always been. Silent, skilled, unbreakable. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.